what you're creating. So you keep drawing sexual partner after sexual partner after sexual partner to invalidate you sexually when you're in this type of a situation, and it just goes on and on and on in a broken record. Because that which you are already, which is insecure, you put out into the environment to prove that you're insecure. Now the environment that you're creating around you by your insecurity, it is totally amoral. It's the universe around us feeds us exactly what we're putting out. Any question here? Comments? Some of you, I feel some real funny energy, like, oh my, oh my, what am I going to do now? Does that coming from insecurity, or is it not? Here's where you go back to chapter 11 of book 1 and start writing this down on your list, and then you put it clear at the top so you don't have to worry about it. Okay? But this is something that is very vital. Now, for a man also, how would a man respond? How? What would he be doing to prove that he's a man? He's going to become a womanizer. Because, first of all, he has a prostate problem that's already he's worrying about that could turn into bone cancer. All right? And probably will turn into bone cancer after a while, because this is what a lot of men who have prostate problems, it turns into bone cancer. So they're all concerned about their masculinity. So they have to prove their masculinity by doing what? Having sex, which depletes them even further by having sex, which brings on the bone cancer that they're definitely worried about, and it comes on faster. All right? And you have a double fear line all the time. And so the very thing that you fear, you create over and over again to make sure it happens on a very reactive level. That which we have feared has come upon us. And the universe has provided exactly what we have resisted the most. Any questions on this? Who said yes? Ian, stand up here, please, and let's have a discourse from you on whatever.
It's very brief. It's just that you said when you have sex you create bone cancer. That's not by the act. That's by the thought pattern.
It's by the fact that you have already a problem in the prostate. Right. And then you are already moving that direction, because take a look at this. Take a look at the fork we have here. See? We have a very definite fork, and if we don't take care of that particular thing which is already overstressed, then that's going to degenerate even farther. And everyone knows that if you have a cancer of the prostate, that's the first tendency toward bone cancer. In most cases, this is what you'll find. Okay, sir? That doesn't mean that if you have sex, you have bone cancer. Cancel, cancel. Yes, sir, John. Nope. If you have a double line here at 3 o'clock-ish in the thymus area, that accentuates the fear aspect. And so you become hyper as far as fear is concerned, regarding whatever that's tied into. And therefore, that which you have feared has come upon us. And so when we look at the fear aspect, which is already intensified, then anything that that fear is going to be tied into, that's where the object of our affection is going to be, and we're going to have problems in that particular area. Any questions? Next, Anita? Thyroid thymus tie-in. Okay, you can have that any different way. I want to just show you. You have one which is blue, which is one type of a thyroid thymus tie-in. You can have another one where the line is clear up here, which ties in the thymus and the thyroid. So there's different ways you can tie that in together. Now, what does that mean on a level of emotionality? What's the person going through? Okay, come up here, sir.
I'm a bit confused, John. Thymus on one side and the thyroid on the other. On the time.
The thymus, you have a right eye, so the thymus is going to be roughly at 3 o'clock in the right eye.
On this side of the right eye.
No, not on the heart area. Opposite the heart.
The heart area is on this side in the right eye.
The heart will be at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, this side.
In the right eye. The heart will be at 9 o'clock, and the thymus will be at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, we're at 3 o'clock now.
That's right. That will be the thymus.
Right.
In the
lung area, yeah.
In the right eye.
No, but
the right eye will be to your left as you're looking at it. Okay, put that on there. This is the right eye.
This is the German chart, isn't it?
Now, in the right here, see, you got the heart over here roughly at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And over here, you have it roughly at 3 o'clock, you have the thymus.
Yes. Where do we get the tie-in on those opposite sides of the eye?
Pardon me?
Where do we get the tie-in on the thyroid and the thymus on the opposite side?
I don't understand your question then.
Well, that's heart and thymus. Yeah. Yeah, it's on both sides.
Okay, here, look.
Yeah. Yes, I realise that. Yeah.
You've got the thyroid around here somewhere. And here's your thymus here, roughly.
Yeah.
So this is about 2:30-ish, and this is 3 o'clock. They're on the same side.
And we can have it on the same side on the Jensen chart on the other side.
Now, the thymus on the right side is the heart's here.
Yes.
And he puts the thymus down below it.
So we can have that tie-in on either side of the eye.
The heart?
On the right eye, yes.
Yeah. Now, the thymus, we have found, is primarily on the left side because it's behind the heart and slightly a little bit above it. So it's actually, I found it up in here most of the time.
But earlier on, we had a thyroid thymus tie-in.
Here's the thyroid,
Yeah.
which is usually at 2:30.
Yeah.
I find that where Jensen says it is.
Yeah.
And then the thymus, again, is down here just a little bit further, around 3 o'clock-ish.
So we can work from both charts.
Well, see, the thyroid is here in Jensen chart.
Yes.
No, in the right eye.
Left eye. Left eye.
No, the thyroid is not in the left eye here.
The thyroid's on the opposite
The
side.
thyroid in the left eye, if this were an L, the thyroid would be over here.
Correct.
And the thymus would be over here at 9 o'clock.
And the left eye would be on the opposite side.
And pardon me? The left eye
on the Jensen
would be
chart,
the opposite of this.
Yeah.
Now, Jensen, again, in the left eye now, puts the heart over here.
Yes.
And puts the thymus just right below it.
Correct.
See, this is the heart, and here's the thymus in the Jensen chart.
Good.
You're saying it's reversed on both charts?
I'm saying that on this chart, Jensen puts it here, where in other charts, which I agree with, the thymus will be over here at 9 o'clock in the left eye.
I understand now that you can get that. So we need to use both.
You have to look at both because anatomical differences can throw the whole thing off.
Good.
But the thymus being behind the heart would throw it over into this side rather than keep it on this side. If it were above the heart, for Jensen, if we're looking at anatomically, then thymus would be up in here somewhere, as I see it.
Yeah. Interior, exterior. Yeah, I've got it.
I've never found the thymus here. That the thyroid appears to be, if you look at the left, The thyroid is in here toward the front of the body, and therefore, if we're dealing with a crossover, okay, which we usually are, we'll find the thyroid over here because we have the upper part here is crossed over. It is here. Here's the back, but you have the crossover, and then the neck, which is in the back also, is over here, all crossed over. When I start learning a little bit about iridology. I mean, listen, these things are confusing. I have it all down, but I haven't gotten a chart yet. And I'm still sorting through stuff because there's some things that are contradictory, because there's some things that are both forward and backward, therefore you find it in both charts. Check that little bone chart and you see what I'm talking about, like with the pelvis. You got the front of the pelvis, you got the back of the pelvis, you got then you got, you know, you go on and things become quite complicated. Did I confuse you all sufficiently? I hope so. Okay, next. Did we get through this one? Oh, we haven't got this one yet. All right. The question was, where are we, Anita? Okay. How would you interpret this if this were in the right eye? Well, I appreciate you. You're right on the beam here, you know, checking me on every eye, make sure they're correct. That's what I would do. You keep up checking and double checking and triple checking, never swallowing anything like a pill. All right? On this one, right eye, male. Let's say you got a male with a right eye, which is to the left as you're looking at it, which is which side of the body? Right side. Okay? Now you got a big line in the thyroid and a big line in the thymus. Pardon? If it's on the right side, anger toward young, creative activity. They would have a fear of creation and an anger that they would put out toward any creation that they see. And often with anger, you have destruction. So if you have somebody over here creating a sandcastle down here on the beach and you're 3 years old, and somebody else just created a sandcastle, what will you probably do? Go down and kick it over. And that's what it'll look like, because you'll be destroying and being angry at anything that's creative or young, because you'll also have a certain amount of fear toward it. And we tend to destroy sometimes those things that we fear the most because they're both next to each other in the scale of emotionality.
So what's the difference in the two patterns?
Just that I'm just showing you that there's variations in the tie-ins. Yeah, it's pretty well similar as far as I'm concerned, because the emotions are going to take precedent here. But it may affect different levels of that same pie that we're dealing with. But the thyroid is definitely going to be involved, and so is the thymus. Any considerations here? You're dealing with male energy. So you're fearful toward male energy on one hand, and you're angry at it toward the other. Now when you're angry, is that somewhat of an aggressive position? And when you're fearful, how do you act when you're fearful? You back away from it. So you've got ambivalent type feelings toward anybody who's male, who's doing something. On one hand, you're fearful of them because they're doing something. On the other hand, you're angry toward them because they're doing something, and you have two feelings simultaneously that you don't quite understand. This helps you understand it. Thymus is security-mindedness, yes. It could be very anger toward security. And people who are becoming very secure, they want 3 houses, they want 3 cars, they want 3 suits of clothes for every day. And other people don't understand that. And they're angry because this person is working night and day to surround himself with physical substance. Okay, you ready for this? As you come up scale, You come up from unconsciousness up to apathy. You come up then to grief, and then you come up to fear. At the level of fear, you start putting on weight because you are accumulating mass around yourself. Just like if you understand the transmutation of elements, okay, with your endothermic reaction, you are increasing within the body. You're going from simple elements to complex elements within the body. And you have your continual endothermic reaction because you're absorbing energy from the universe around you to create more complex elements out of simple elements. And so when you hit fear, you start amassing around you a huge pot belly or massive weight. And people who are large, they love being large when they're in this position because they are secure, because they're surrounding themselves with mass. Guess what? I know this because as soon as my pancreas began working, I started gaining weight, and I loved it. And so I'm big, and I love it. It's amazing. You follow what I'm saying? Okay, now what will happen is the thyroid kicks in, and the person starts having high fevers that they're re-experiencing when they were a kid. The Peyer's patches heals. Am I going too fast? The Peyer's patches heals in the small intestine area, which is reflex to the thyroid, and then the thyroid starts working, which controls the metabolism of the body. Then what happens then to the physical body when the thyroid kicks in and starts working? You start losing weight. And so when you get up above fear, then the weight starts peeling off of you, and then you come down to a real, happy physical specimen. Are you with me on this? You consider that. So as far as security-mindedness is concerned, that is not only just physical things around you, it is also physical mass as far as the physical body is concerned. And so sometimes when people start healing and they have this endothermic reaction coming out of them with their healing crisis where their body's ice cold, suddenly they start gaining weight and wondering where it's coming from, and they can't get it off until when? The thyroid kicks in. This will usually be after they've had several massive healing crises where they go through the high fevers. And when the high fevers straighten out, the thyroid kicks in, and then everything starts coming back to the normalcy that you would like to be. And then you used to go through the exothermic reaction. You feel all this massive heat coming out of your system, and then you come back to your genetic normalcy. I might add that all of my genetic normalcies are giants. I'm the smallest one in my family. And so if you think of a genetic normalcy, you come to that genetic normalcy, that would be your DNA pattern, which of course has overlays on that, and then you start getting into genetic healing crisis where your body keeps going through various levels of straightening out and perfection. David?
So there's a time lapse between the process, and yet if it's a tying, we're supposed to wait for the two to close off together. They will still do that, and then there'll be the process still going on?
Maybe.
You should still wait till they both heat up and finish up together.
And pulse out together at that time, and then usually that will break out. And you'll have just indicating lines, and the tie-in will be gone.
The process will still take quite a while to complete itself.
It may. It may take several point holdings. But you'll notice that the line will weaken and get smaller. The tie-in line will get weaker with each point holding. And that's why when you look in the eye carefully, for some of you who have been on the program now for a couple of years, you'll find that some of your lines are very red, and then you have these little skinny little lines that used to be red that are still there, but they're not that big heavy red lines. They're little lines now. They're starting to show up where the big red lines used to be. They're getting smaller. And so you're taking all the steam out of them. The reactions aren't there as they were before. And you're gaining, shall we say, ascendancy over your reactive patterns, where you have them under your control. On the tie-in lines is what we're talking about. Okay? That's wonderful. Okay. We have two different examples, one in blue and one in red. I think. Yep. Pardon me? The red one has the line which ties the two lines together, would be a degenerative line. Yes, sir. So it can be in different locations on the indicating lines. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Say that again, Keith. Yes? Nope. Some of the little ones you have to worry about, because some of those little ones are extremely important depending on where they're located. And some of those little ones I've seen people where they have great big tumors with very small enclosures in the sclera of the eye. So the size of the enclosure does not necessarily mean the size of the tumor. Okay, Anita. Now here is the gonads, uterus, prostate tie-in. And here for the man and or the woman, oftentimes you have something that looks like this. And sometimes this is thrown in here somewhere. And you got all kinds of enclosures here. But remember, you have a 60-degree angle. If you want to get back to 60-degree reflex angles, you have 60 degrees from literally 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock. Here's your 7 o'clock, and here's your 5 o'clock. Now, what would be the situation with a person who had a degeneration line through here that's all tied in to the gonads and to the uterus? The reproductive system would be somewhere along the line totally invalidated. And a person is going to have to look into that in such a way. Now let me throw you a curve. And I want you to think about it. I want you to ask questions about it, because this bothers a lot of people. Back in 1980 to about 1984, I would say, 1983 to 1984, we were very, very careful about seminars such as this. We would put people down on a table, a massage table, and we would hold points. And suddenly what would happen is the person would no longer be on the table, but they would see all this electronic gear around them to start with. And so for about a year or two, they'd see nothing but these coils of wires, and they'd see themselves strapped to the table, both arms and legs with a big leather strap across their middle, and that they'd see them being implanted with electronic gadgetry to where they would have a word pattern played off on a tape recorder while they're being zapped with electric current, so that they're unconscious while the word pattern is being played, such as I must work, I must work, or I must study, I must study. And you'd find these people, and would have maybe 120 people in a room, and would have a one-on-one, so would have 60 massage tables, and you'd have maybe 10 or 15 people at a time. I'm telling you the truth on this, okay? I'm telling you the honest truth on it. You're down here in Australia. This is up here in the States. We would have maybe 20 people at a time, 15 to 20 people, where their feet would be lifted off the table this far. Their head would be lifted off the table this far, and you'd see a sine wave, just like you're beating out a carpet. You ever take a carpet and flip it out and you see all these wrinkles go through the carpet? It's like a sine wave. And you see the sine wave going through that person's body while you're trying to hold their STO points, and their head, here's the feet. Watch me. The feet are going up and down from here to here to here to here with this gigantic, barbarous wave going through it this fast. And oftentimes in a seminar we'd lose over half of our massage tables. They'd be just a pile of splinters with people on the floor. The head would be on a pillow, hopefully, and we hope we didn't get him on a hard surface, and we hope that the massage table wouldn't break. The head would be going up and down like this. Watch me. And that's just exactly how fast. Anita, you've heard about this, but this was before her time. But what would happen here, this is absolutely amazing, and the person would be going through an implant, which they were absolutely certain that they were not here in this space and time. They were on a table somewhere else. I must be responsible. I must be responsible. And they're going through that until they blew the thing out. And so everyone who had this I must be responsible, guess how they were after they blew that thought pattern out? I don't have to be responsible anymore. And they take a little vacation from it for a few months. And then they could choose to be responsible if they wanted to, but it was no longer a compulsion where they were the first one there in the morning to open the door and the last one to leave and close the door and make sure everything was locked and taken care of, and they couldn't leave till their desk was clear. Are you hearing me? This is reality. I can show you 10,000 people that had gone through these things. Okay? You'd have a word pattern. Now watch me. Back to the little thing here. You would have mothers with 14 kids with signs like this: stress on the ovary, stress on the uterus. They'd get on a table and have their points held. And all of a sudden their body would be bumping up and down on this doggone table, tearing the massage table apart with the word pattern: I must reproduce, I must reproduce, I must reproduce, I must reproduce. And where would they be? All of a sudden they had memories of a laser coming down from the center of a beautiful, beautiful building. A laser beam coming down, implanted with an electronic sound: I must reproduce, I must reproduce. One on their ovaries, one in their heart, one in their brain, and different colors, different times, with this laser, colors and vibrations and whatnot. And they come off that table, they feel, I must reproduce, and they must have children. And they take the very finest women in this age of Atlantean times and take away their free agency to where they had to reproduce because they were the best genes. What happened in Germany during the Second World War? Same thing. People were drawn in, they had to reproduce. And you had many, many children, thousands of children born by the best genetics possible from various women that were hauled in and were used to reproduce children as a breeding factory. You find that history repeats itself. Some of you may not believe that at one time there was an Atlantis. But the reason Atlantis was destroyed is because all of the people in Atlantis lost their free agency. At first they started implanting people because, you know, like a no smoking type thing, they'd implant them to where they wouldn't smoke. And then there, you had a smoke-free Atlantis, okay? And then another problem would arise, and then they'd implant the people so they wouldn't steal. And then no more stealing, no more crime. And then you wanted to have a good army, so you got a bunch of guys together, you know, and implant them, I must fight, I must fight, I must fight. And so you had a good army to protect the frontiers out there from any foreign invasions and so on, from out there in the steppes of Russia or other places that were Atlantis at that time. And so you had all this thing going on. Is this exciting or isn't it not? You take teachers, I must teach, I must teach. And then they'd be teachers because they felt they had to teach. They're very happy to teach. Then they were implanted finally with what they had to teach. They became good teachers, but they lost their freedom of choice because their freedoms now were a compulsion because it was completely implanted. And so for several years, we had sometimes the whole room would be full of people going through various implants, each one unique to that person. And suddenly, we no longer had those barbaric sine waves that tore tables apart and left people wondering if they were sane. And then people all out around the country in different places would be going through vibrations through their body at home, in their beds, and elsewhere, and wondering why they were going through all of this sort of stuff when one of their cousins was attending one of my seminars. Morphogenetically, they were getting it. And if you go back about 10, 15 years, you'll realize that there are a lot of people who are having a lot of funny things happening to them morphogenetically that they didn't understand until they understand this concept of the sine wave. Then suddenly the vibrations were gone. And the vibrations then became just a gentle vibration going through the body. And it's degenerated now to where it's just a very subtle vibration going through the body. But nothing heavy, nothing strong, unless there's actually a vibration regeneration of the muscles. But you go back to this. As soon as a person went through this particular problem, I must reproduce, sine wave was complete, all this is broken off. And then they didn't feel they had to reproduce anymore and have a kid every year. They wanted to give their body a rest for a change because they didn't have to reproduce. Are you aware that some women who have large families believe they have to have a kid at least every year? They feel they just have to have kids? Where is the gonad level? Level 7? Survival through reproduction. Survival through reproduction. And people felt they had to survive, and they had to survive through reproduction. And so these things become very, very real. Any questions? I threw that in because basically that's the leg area. Oftentimes. What happens to people who feel like they have to reproduce? What happens to their legs oftentimes? They get weak just thinking about it. Well, a few people are starting to chuckle here, so it does hit a resonant chord. Anyway, now I threw that in there for a purpose. Here it is. Sometimes you have in the German charts, you'll have the adrenals right at 6 o'clock. Now you might say the adrenals in the left iris is just slightly off center this direction, about 6:15 to 6:30. That is not always the case. Sometimes the adrenals are anywhere from about 5:45 over here to about 6:30. And the adrenal positioning, according to the German schools of iridology, will vary anatomically, which is accurate. Any questions? Okay, Anita, have the next one, please. Ah, yes. Here's where we get into more and more stress in a person's life. And can you bring this over a bit? You have 180 degrees. Heart, liver, gonads, adrenal, thymus, etc. It's a tie-in. Pull that over that way, Anita, if you would. And so you have all of these indicating lines with the degeneration line going all the way around in various disarray and disorder to tie them all together. Here's a person under tremendous stress, but it's the lower half of the body. You'll find this occasionally. Now, what would the lower half of the body be in relationship to the upper half of the body that didn't have any? Now, you figure that one out, and you tell me about what you think. Because you have the thymus, okay? You'll have on the left eye here, okay? You'll have the, in the left eye here, you'll have the heart. Over here, you'll have the thymus. Down here in the left eye, you have another area, another area, another area, and they're all tied in together. Now, you tell me what's different between a 180-degree degeneration line in the lower half of the body as compared with the upper half of the body. That'd be very mentally alert. Would the pineal pituitary thyroid area be affected? No, not really. So they're pretty clear thinkers, aren't they? Now, are they mental or are they physical? Very mental. So the physical areas here are the active areas, you know, the areas of the spleen, for example, down here on the gonad level. This is survival, isn't it? This is anger connected with survival, the gonad level, reproduction, survival. Here they're quite concerned about it from a fear point of view and also from the heart point of view. So the heart's involved. And we know that the heart is also an endocrine gland that has many little hormones that control the entire endocrine system. Physically very tired, but mentally alert. This is what you see. But these will vary from one person to the next, so you can't put everybody into one category here. But you can certainly separate these things out one at a time. If the adrenals are going to be affected there, the person is going to be very, very tired with adrenal letdown. So, there you are. Sydney? Pardon me? Sure, there'd be reflexes all over the place. Absolutely. Any questions? Next one. Enjoy. This is 360 degrees. And these are for people who are just really stressed out. They're not doing what they want to do, and they are into, I have to keep everybody happy. I have to keep everybody happy. We've seen people with this type of a tie-in. They get off the table after they blow out a big, huge sine wave with a word pattern, I have to keep everybody happy. Beautiful, beautiful for a hostess, you know, people who are taking care of people when they come into the, you have to have a hostess to greet people when they come in the door, and they have to keep everybody happy. Have you ever had people with a feeling, I have to keep everybody happy? Have you ever had people like that or known people like that? Anybody here like that? I have to keep everybody happy. And if one person is not happy, they're not happy. So they have to go out of their way to make sure everyone is happy. What's that, Anita? Okay. But the thing is, you'll have these stress lines all the way around, different shapes and sizes all the way around the eye. Sometimes you'll have great big enclosures like this up there, where the body's starting to break down and starting to disintegrate, and then you have to really work with this person, because that's not going to heal until we can get a person to where they can relax. And then if they're economically depressed, and they can't get a job, or they're so sick where they can't work, and they've broken up a family, and one thing or another, boy, I'll tell you, adds insult to the injury. And then it's very, very difficult to let the person realize that all is perfect divine order. Now, I have a thought appearing in my mind. I hope I don't offend anybody. But here in the room here, we've had situations occur. Nobody cares. What if we have a thought pattern that we hold in our mind? Nobody cares. Nobody cares about me. Will the universe provide? Yes, it will. The universe will provide perfectly and give you every opportunity to make sure that you know that nobody cares. You follow me? And so if we hit the thought pattern, nobody cares. Or if you put out the word pattern, I don't have any money, I'm broke. Will the universe provide? And you will have circumstance after circumstance which will prove to you that you won't have any money and that you are broke, if you hold that thought pattern with a belief in it and keep it in your mind. And so when you burn out through the Kundalini fire all the burn that's holding you there and let go of it, and then you realize that you've been here for 50 years, and even though you appear to be broke, there always seems to be meal on the table somewhere. You always seem to get petrol for from somewhere the petrol comes, and you got an old car that's still running down the road, and you still have a place where you can sleep at night, and you got clothes on your body. What more do we need? And if we look carefully, we might find a tiny coin that we have left over, but we find that we're still just fine. Everything is perfect divine order, isn't it? Yes, sir, Simon?
Any special significance to a negative entity today?
Come up here and let's make that question a matter of record.
I was just looking at this map, wondering if there's any special significance to maybe a negative entity in this particular example.
Now, I'll have to be honest with you. If I look into the eye, I cannot tell from the eye that a person has an entity. But there are cases when a person's on the table and they're having their points held and their abdomen starts bouncing like this, bouncing around, boom, off this side, and then all of a sudden, boom, out this side, and then up in here, boom, you know, and the person's starting to squirm on the table like a snake or a reptile. And there's all kinds of funny, bizarre smells coming out of the person that are absolutely unique. You know good and well that there may be something there that has snuck in through a hole in the aura somewhere. Now, there's different ways to look at these holes in the auric field. All right? But basically, I think that when you understand the energy fields around the body and you take Kirlian photography, you will realize that there are holes in the auric field. And when a person re-experiences the trauma that causes these holes in the auric field to be there, then the holes in the auric field close up. And when they close up, sometimes you have these amazing little creatures coming out squeaking and groaning, you know, in different voices. And out of little girls' voice box, sometimes you have old men screaming in old 15th century German, or somebody who's Vietnamese screaming out, like who's you know, in pain or something like that. You've got these crazy things coming out of people. And after you've seen it 15, 20 times, you begin to realize that in some cases people have entities. Now, I don't know, but I don't think everyone has these entities. But I believe that when these holes in the auric field close up, that the energy field that is there has to leave the body. And sometimes they leave with this very, very heavy cold wind in a warm room, and everyone's freezing around the person, which is more than an endothermic reaction. When a person's sitting at the end of the table, and I have seen this, the entity leaves and knocks that person clear over backward against the wall, at the point of their leaving claw marks on the person's throat as they leave. They look like chicken claws. I scratch my head a little bit and look and say something happened. And so I'm inclined to be a little bit skeptical until I see it. And when I see it with my own eyes where there's physical changes. I had one fellow who had white silver hair one time, and we're just sitting there holding thymus points, experimenting on thymus points. And he's still going, rah, rah, like this. And I'll tell you, now listen, this is what everyone in the room saw. The mouth got larger, the roars got louder, it felt like the jaw just disconnected, and his hair turned from silver gray to black in a matter of a few minutes, while he let loose one of the loudest and ugliest entity smells I've ever had or heard of, and at the same time his jaw opened up with these big roars that it would swallow a basketball. I mean, that jaw just opened up where it was just absolutely huge. And then you realize that sometimes the body distorts when an entity comes out of the body. You wouldn't believe it until you see it. When you see a tongue a foot long with huge teeth grinning out from, looks like some sort of a dinosaur type animal, and this tongue is flicking in and out like that while they're hissing like that while they're releasing an entity, you begin to believe it because you have seen it. Now I've had fundamentalist Christian groups holding points, and this one person started their claw legs like this, they went up like this, they started hissing, the teeth came down like this, and the mouth opened up like this, the tongue came darting out like that, the whole facial features changed, and all of a sudden they became believers because they saw it. Now, I've told you before, when this happens, you've got this all recorded from earlier seminars, just simply say, whoever you follow in whatever belief system, there are always those people who are masters who have resurrected or ascended. Just simply say, in the name of Jesus Christ, I command the entity in this person's body, whether it's Tim, Joe, or Annie, you say, I command that this entity go directly to the light of God now, and all of a sudden you have cold winds, you have vomiting sometimes, you have diarrhea coming out in copious amounts, and this thing just squeaks and groans as it leaves the body. It used to be that way about 10 years ago. We don't have that disastrous type things much anymore. We just have a nice little cold wind and something leaves. But I personally haven't seen a whole lot of this, maybe 1 or 2 a month, not more than that. But they happen. Now, here comes the reptile man. Steve, would you come up here, please?
Would you say it's necessary to say that out loud, or is that...
You say it out loud. That's the rule for the game that I understand. We're talking about entities, sir. I'm talking about things that I have seen coming out of people while they're lying on the table having their points held. Now, I believe that I'm occupying a position right here without naming any names. But what happened to a whole group of people here that were in this room, I believe? Did you or other people see entities coming out of this one individual? Without naming names, please. Talk to us about entities involving. I mean, I want people to understand.
Well, it depends which case you're talking about. I mean, with the body electronics, we have had. Okay, other things. Okay, fine. Yes. Now with body electronics, for a start, once you start holding points, you can start releasing, just by being on the STO points, you can start releasing entities, and there's a whole range of other dimensional beings that are operating out there. We have moguls, mass statins, we have aliens, we have reptilians, we have inlines, we have outlines. And we have entities, we have hiddens, we have another big range of dimensional beings that can actually invade bodies. Now what can happen, I'll give you a couple of examples. I had a chap, this was only about 2 weeks ago, came from Adelaide, and this chap came up here and I got him on the table, and I usually do a total, I usually do what I call a total clearance. We go in first and I ask the body, with the system I have, I talk to the etherical being that runs the particular body. And that etherical being, once it gives permission to work with it, then it will answer me through the body, through kinesiology. And one of the things I do is I find out, by asking the body, does this body have interference from other dimensions? If it says yes, then okay, I know now that there is interference. Now I go in to find out, what is it do I have, because there's a whole range. It will then tell me what I'm dealing with. Once I find out what I'm dealing with, I then go in and I go into the SDO points, I go to neurovascular points, and I ask the body, there's many different ways. Sometimes it may come straight to the surface. The case I had it 2 weeks ago, a chap from Adelaide came up there, he was on the table, and he had no sooner got onto the table when his body, I'll just show you an example, just say this is his table. I'm actually on the SDO neurovascular point. This is going to be a bit hard because I can't use both. Now, I had the chap's STO points, I was on the neurovascular points, and the body was actually in a wave formation, jumping off the table that high, and just bang, bang, in this wave formation, at least this high off the table, and this was constant, and it was screaming, let us alone, we need this body, we need this body. And I just commented, yes, you may need it, but it doesn't need you. Now what I did was I asked the body, does this body want to release this thing that's in it? It says yes. I say, thank you. I always acknowledge the etherical being when I'm working. So what I did then was I asked the being itself when it first came in. The first thing it said was, I'm not telling you anything, you find out for yourself. So I commanded the etherical being to step aside. I then command the etherical body to come to the surface and to answer me. I then ask it when it first came in. Then using kinesiology again, I go back in before the age of 10, before the age of 5, before the age of 1, prior to birth. Okay, let's go back. Did it come in on genetic line? Did it come in through an incarnation? This one went back 5 incarnations back. I then locked into circuit, and the next minute the chap was back 5 incarnations back, and he's reliving the event back in time. His father was a 33-degree Mason 5 generations back. Now, 5 incarnations back. In that incarnation, when you start getting to understand how the secret societies work and how the initiations of secret societies were set up to open doors so these things could subtly enter and take over bodies. When you get into understand the secret societies, they make symbols. To understand the symbols, you've got to go back to the Egyptians. The Egyptians had symbols. The symbols penetrate the physical world, the etheric world, and the soul world. They're very powerful. When we make these symbols, they penetrate the 3 worlds, and they open up doors. They then allow other beings to access in through the body. So this is where it came in. So what we did was, by going back and reliving the time back there, and then releasing the, let's say, inlines which had come back in and the access, and then by being back in the same time, same place, same location, the same space, and if you could change it, how would you change it? This is actually getting the duality back in time. And they are then telling me how they change it. I then bring it back into present. Now once in present, I go in to do what's closing. And that is, I now ask the etherical being if it wishes to break all agreements that have been made with any, and I go through the big range of things that are there, prior to birth. It says yes. Then I ask the physical body, it says yes. Then I go in and I ask the etherical body if it wishes to break any agreements that have been made since birth. It says yes. I then ask the physical body, it says yes. If any two agree on any one thing, so be it. This is a universal law. They have agreed to break the conditions and the agreements that allowed it into the body, so be it, and the thing has to leave. And it leaves. They feel it leave. They feel the thing is mass. It's a weight. And you actually feel the thing leaving the body. I had another episode about 3 weeks ago with a woman who came in with an 18-month-old child. And she said, look, I know there's something interfering with my child. She said, every now and then, she said, it's just not a child. So I said, well, let's find out. I said, will you surrogate for your child? She said, what do I have to do? I said, just get on the table. Will you give me permission to surrogate? She says, yes. I then locked the energy field of the child into the mother, then asked the child, which is now the mother, or the mother, which was now the child, for permission to work with it. It gave me permission. I then asked the body, did it have interference? It did yes. I then went back and said, okay, where'd the interference come from? Then went back and it said last life. Okay, what age? Age of 6. Thank you, I locked into circuit. The next minute, she was back there at the age of 6, and here's a 6-year-old boy talking to me out of the body. I said, what happened back in time? It says, my granddad died, my granddad died. And what happened when your granddad died? I didn't want him to leave, I don't want you to leave. So when you didn't want him to leave, what happened? I felt this hot burning sensation coming up my spine. Thank you. I now knew what I was dealing with. I then brought him back into present, which is in the physical body of the mother. And as I did, I no sooner got him to present, and I just said, I hereby command, and the next minute, okay, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go. I got this grandfather speaking out of the woman. So I just read it its rights and took it out. No problems. So you're going to find, I've had cases with body electronics where we've had people on the ground and they've had foam coming out of their mouth and extra plasma running down the side of their face. I've been working on bodies and they've been spitting at me in the face as the entity has been up and leaving the body. And I've dealt with dozens and dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of cases of entities and other dimensional beings are removing them. And they play a major part in our body, and dimensional beings, when you understand what's happening in the whole overall structure of the world today, they are running this world on a level by running bodies high up in governments, through the secret societies and through the setups which they've set up, right through the structure today. When you understand the whole setup, then you understand how they run and what they gain out of running it.
Pull up a chair, sir. Now, did you hear what this wild man said? I happen to agree with him, because this is my findings using body electronics. Now, before I met Steve, Steve was doing his thing another way, using kinesiology. And I looked at him and said, this is the wildest thing I've ever seen. Until I find out, after being quite negative at times and somewhat more than skeptical at times, I see what he does and see how he does it, and within certain bounds and limitations, from my perspective, I think this thing works beautifully. And for the freedom fighters of the future, if I can use that expression, I think this is what every freedom fighter must be armed with. Because I don't know if you folks are aware yet, but are you aware that entities are here from other planets, what we might call different types of extraterrestrial beings? Are any of you aware of that? May I see a show of hands of those that are? And some of you don't know. Karen, would you come up here, please? I want to put Karen on the spot. Steve, I want you to feed in here what you know. We had a seminar up in Queensland just a short time ago, back in January of this year. And Karen, without in any way revealing things that are very sacred to you, okay? I'm just going to ask you some questions. Did we have visitations of spaceships up there that are absolutely visible on the grounds there at Genazzano? Good. Could you estimate how many people saw the spaceships themselves? Pardon me?
There were many people. I don't know exactly how many. I know Steve saw them with a group of other people. I saw them. Many others saw the light that they suck you into. I saw them on the ground and their ships around and above, but then lots of people did.
How many people would you say saw the ships or the people? Roughly, just a very, very, not a generous estimate, but a very low estimate. How many people would you say saw them?
Probably 10 that I can think of that I spoke to.
10 responsible, highly intelligent people. People getting drug out of their beds at night, in 2 cases in particular, screaming and yelling all the time as they're getting pulled out through the walls. Is that correct, Steve? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, you're sponsoring me here at the Hideaway. This is responsible stuff. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, what actually happened on that particular occasion
Stand up, sir. This is important.
We had one of the girls came to me, and we actually had an episode here at the Hideaway the last time John was here, and it involved one of the girls that was up there, and she came to me and she said, "What in the hell's going on?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Last night I woke up by the window looking out, talking about this bright light." And I said, and I just ignored it at first because I had a few other things on my mind at the time. Then we went into the centre, and there was at least 5 or 6 people got up and said something weird happened last night. We had this bright light in our room, we had this bright light outside our room, and there was these beams of light. So I got the girl who was here at the Hideaway and up there as well, and I put her on the table to just find out what we're dealing with, and went into it. And sure enough, they were there, and they came outside. There's a beam of light, and they came through the wall, and they asked her to come out into the beam of light. The light is used for breaking down our atomic structure, the atoms in the body, so they can be beamed up on the ship. When I deal with abductions, I've been doing abductions for 15 years, and this is how it's done. It's done on another dimension. It's not done on this physical level, but they can break down our body by astrally projecting up and then break down the cells and then rematerializing it back up on the ship. So what had happened is she had refused, because I've been speaking to her the day before, and I said, "You have the power." I said, "Just refuse it. You have rights in this sector not to go with them, just break any conditions." So she refused, and they left her, went on to the next. So we found out, we had a meter up there, and there's this meter which, have you ever heard of an E-meter? Okay, an E-meter works with other dimensions, and you can actually talk to an etherical being on it, and it'll answer yes, yes, no, no. And so we went on the E-meter to find out, okay, is there interference? And yes, and where it's coming from, how many are they interfering with? We found there were 10 people that were actually had what we call inlines from other dimensions in that room. So what we did, we did a clearance. I won't go into how we did, but we did a clearance with the whole 10 and broke all the connections and then commanded these things out of the area. And it was good for about 2 to 3 weeks until the last week, and then a new batch arrived.
We had some interesting times. Now, Karen, is that substantial? Now, Steve did his thing his way, okay? But I'm talking now from my point of view. There are 10 different people that saw these things and had contact with them and had their liver scared right out of them, where they came running on up to the center, where they were scared to death because of what was going on, what they saw, the people they saw, the little beings they saw. They were scared spitless.
Including me. I think it became a collective fear. And I thought, are we all taking off a collective past fear from another time, because we're all working hard and, you know, working through our bodies and stuff. I got to the point where I was in a little tiny tent down in the camp. Steve was there were a few other people in their tents, and I kept hearing them at night time, and
some people saw the lights right there, the big bright lights.
Oh yeah, I saw the lights too, and I saw the ships come right down low and sit over the trees and move over the trees.
So did other people too.
Yeah, they all did.
About 10 people that I know of.
And I went to there's a seer up there. I forget his name. Andre. And he was talking about the different ones, and like Steve, I don't know much about the sector. Steve knows all about that. But Andre was saying, well, you have the power, call in the Grand Council and the LOM and all the rest. So I actually did, and commanded them, well, Steve did too, and just commanded them out, and we didn't seem to have any more trouble. I was so scared that I got to a point where I said, look, I'm coming up to stay up where the people were.
There were about 6 or 7 that did.
Yeah, and then I just said, well, you know, I seem to get over it. Thought, oh, well, this is my lot. I may as well face it down there. But we didn't have any more trouble until Steve said we got a new batch came in just as we were leaving. But there was another lot at Mount Burrell. Yeah, I'll tell you about that lot later. But I don't know what else you'd like to know.
I think that's sufficient. Thank you very much, Karen. Now, some of the rest of you were up there. Andrea, is this substantially what happened? I slept through the whole thing. I didn't see anything. And I went out hunting for them and looking for them and seeing, you know, went out scouting, and I couldn't find a doggone thing. And I was out every night. I came home, put my head on the pillow, and that was it until morning.
Something I forgot to say was that David and Mari, this is some people there, they were staying at Youngerborough, which is a little way away, and they were driving home, and at night time when they got there, everything was really, really black at the motel where they were, and yet the light, he said the light followed them, and then it came through the wall. Mari didn't see it, but he just didn't take any notice of it.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that. That's it. That's interesting. And this is 2 respectable, intelligent people. The rest of us might be called into question from time to time, but these people were intelligent people. Now, so what I'm trying to say is the aliens are out there. This is a reality. I don't understand exactly all the details yet. This is Steve's expertise. But I have a lot of respect for some of the things that Steve does. The other things I don't understand. And that's all right. But the thing is there are some things here that I hope that you take time to have a little seminar, Steve, with you on this subject. And that if you have places that you'd like Steve to come in and give a seminar on entities, he has some ideas that you might want to take with a grain of salt, and other ideas you might want to really listen to the old man. I think the same thing would apply to me too. Okay?
I just find more than anything is that if you're going to be doing body electronics, then I feel that it is aware for your own safety to understand what does happen, because you can be holding points on somebody and all of a sudden something could rear its ugly head, and you've got to know how to deal with it, because you're the facilitator there and then. And if you don't, and you start to create fear within yourself, you yourself can open up your own doorways and become a target. There's a difference.
Now I concur with that. But now Steve listens to what I have to say. He doesn't agree with me on everything. But we have a mutual respect because there's something out there that we know is going to be tying us together, that we do the best that we can to bring the freedom back to the human soul. And that which unites us is that which we support each other in. Would you consider that, Steve, correct? Okay, that's the way it is. And I think that this is something that you can profit from by studying from Steve and his seminars. So I would encourage you to do that. Now, Anita, can I have the next one, please? Okay, we talked about the pancreas and the adrenals and then the gonads. Now the adrenal, I think I got that off a little bit. It should be down here about 6:30 in the right eye. but there is going to be about a 30-degree variation in placement. Okay? Now, if you had a pancreas adrenal situation, you have to understand that the pancreas and the adrenal stem directly from the solar plexus as a nerve plexus which supports the two, okay? Now, if you have a pancreatic problem and you're not taking care of the adrenal, the pancreas will not heal, and sometimes vice versa. So you have to take care of the solar plexus on your flow sheet for body electronics as a precursor for working on the pancreas and the adrenal area. Now, the tie-ins, like this, then you're going to have to work on both at the same time. The positioning here on the adrenals will vary, again, in the German charts. Okay, next slide. Red blotches in the heart area. Okay, here's the heart indicator in the left eye. If you have these big red blotches, what does that tell you? Okay, check it out. Get all the information you can on it, and then be prepared on the table when you hold the STO and the heart points. Now, on the flow sheet at the top of the page, you have the pancreas there, and you have the heart firing mechanism. Check all these out, and then put checks by the areas that need the special attention. You need that for the safety of your patient. Okay, and then what happens after they've gone through the heart attacks? These red blotches disappear entirely. Now, if they didn't go away entirely, what does that tell you? The person re-experienced it in part, but didn't go through it all the way, and you might pick it up a little bit later on because the pain that is locked into that heart attack, the person may not have been able to access yet or have been willing to endure that level of pain. You with me on that? Okay, Anita. Okay, this is in the right eye, and sometimes you'll have these, quite a number of heavy red lines coming in. Now, will this be a line which will be in triplicate? Not really. These are just a number of different red lines coming in. But you look for the red blotches. Now, oftentimes you'll find asthmatics will have red blotches in that area. And oftentimes when you have asthmatics, do they have pain in their chest? Do they have pain down their arm? And there's a reflex directly from the lungs, the bronchioles, to the heart area. So oftentimes you're going to have problems in both areas. And this we need to look at. Any questions? Okay, may I have the next slide? What number are we on? Okay. Bring this down this way. Keep coming. Keep coming. Here's where we have, now I showed you the blue blotch that goes around the iris, which is the oxygen deprivation, but oftentimes we'll have a big blue blotch that looks like a line like this up in the brain area. And you'll look at that, and this is where the people have short-term memory loss. They're not getting oxygen up to the brain. They can't think clearly. They have problems dealing with problems that require attention. They just can't cope. So we have to get the oxygen back up to the brain. Oftentimes that will simply be an adjustment on the first and second cervical vertebrae, plus your oxygen, plus your gotu-kola, and things like that, which we've talked about already. Okay, next. Right here, we have what you call hamburger. Okay, here it is, hamburger, and this is what you got. It's a brown hamburger, and it's all in blotchiness all the way around the eye. Now this will be very, very close to the iris, and this will have an indication that that will be digestive disorders. Okay, next one, please. Now when the digestive orders clear up, then of course the brown goes away in the sclera of the eye. Okay, here's the signs of concussion. Bring that down a bit. Now way up, if a person's had a concussion, way up between 11 o'clock, it may be off a little bit from 11, it may be down to 10:30, over to maybe 1:30. You follow that up and you see these types of semicircular objects where they open out away from the iris. Now these will be in the bone areas, which some people have the temporal bone and the occiput bone, you know, the sagittal sutures and so on the charts. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I have not been able to narrow down the bones of the head into the iris of the eye. Some have. But the concussions will always indicate where they are. Now if this is a right eye, this would be possibly toward the midline, okay, like at 1 o'clock. This would be toward the midline area of the head. This would probably be over to the right of the midline. If one was clear over in here, I would say it is to the left of the midline, but you'd pick that up on the other sclera. Next slide. Okay, here's degeneration lines moving toward the iris. If I have a degeneration line very close in here, and it moves in like this, very close to the iris, and this is in this location, I'd look into the intestine area and look for dents in toward the pupil, where you have your scar tissue and your problems in that area. And if you, here again, another one, you follow this right directly in and find this very close to the pupil. This one here would also be very close to the pupil. You take your marker and follow that right into the center of the pupil and find the exact spot, and you'll find it every single time. But you take this little measurement right here, and where it's closest to the edge of the iris, that's where the problem will be. Now you may have this type of a problem out in here, and here's your degeneration line. Then you have a big loop coming in. Okay, follow that loop. Any type of loop like this, wherever it might be in the sclera of the eye, you look for the indicating lines. Next, please. Okay, now some of you had a question about strokes. Now here in the brain area, between 11 o'clock roughly and 1 o'clock roughly, if you have a red blotch like this in the right side, which side do you look for paralysis or problems? The left side. If this were a left iris, which would be over here, and there's spots up in the left iris, what do you look for? Which side? The right side. And so you look for a numbness in the right arm, or numbness in the right leg, or the inability to grab, or something like this, or the speech problems. And you take a look at these very, very carefully and find out which side of the brain is your speech, where's your visual, and where's your tactile, and so on. And you'll find that the different parts of the brain